make themselves competitive. So there are a number of essential features of the consortial aspects of the semiconductor industry that I'd like to talk about. And SRC, which has been around for 30 years, was created because the industry did not see a sufficient pipeline of ideas and investment at the basic research level. So SRC was formed to fund university research, and that's what we do. We have now international membership. We were originally a US-only member organization. And we fund university research today worldwide as well, although predominantly in the US. And the value that we provide to the members is access to the results of that research in sort of real time, and access to the people, both the faculty, researchers, and the students. And when I ask our members, why are you a member of SRC, half the time they say because of the students, and half the time they say because of the ideas. So they both go together. We wouldn't have the great research without the good students, and we wouldn't have the good students without funding the great research. So this is a model that's worked exceedingly well. It's created an enterprise in the university community of researchers who are working on relevant research, and thereby producing students and the future workforce. Semitech, on the other hand, is a physical place. It's a bricks and mortar institution that has employees and is focused on nearer term problems and is really addressing manufacturability. How do we take the ideas from the universities and make them manufacturable? And so Semitech has many of the same member companies as SRC, of course. It also has become a global organization, and but it is focused on nearer term problems. So there are some similarities and some differences. There are some aspects of all of this that may or may not be unique. Some people think they are. I'm not sure they are. You can generalize them perhaps. But these consortia are driven by industry, number one, and I think that's an important point in the paper that came out today. The institutes, I think, will really survive and succeed if they are industry-driven, and they need to be focused on an agreed-upon goal. The consensus in the semiconductor industry for many, many years has been, we need to stay on Moore's Law. The miniaturization of integrated circuits that allows the industry to produce products that are smaller, faster, cheaper, more functional is driven by this scaling. And that involves all of the different pieces of the supply chain. The people who make the equipment have to be making equipment that can make things smaller. And all of that has brought the industry together to work and make sure that they're able to stay on that law. It's not a law of physics, of course. It's essentially a law of business. But it's really been viewed as critical to the success of all of the parts of the industry. So, what are some of the lessons that have been learned from the semiconductor industry's experience? Well, one is this idea that the consortium needs to be industry-driven and goal-oriented. I think another piece that's very important is, in the case of both SRC and Semitech, there is an independent third-party operation that manages the consortium. It's not within any of the members. It doesn't rotate around. We have a board that's made up of our member companies, but we are an independent third-party entity. And we are able to manage the relationships between the members, and we also are at the interface between the members, i.e. the industry, and the performers of the research, in our case the universities. And that's an important thing. There are a lot of collaborations that result from these relationships that come about, but we don't require that there be side-by-side collaboration between industry and university researchers. And in fact, there's a bit of a gap that we are in, and that helps, in fact, with IP issues in many cases and so on. So we're the broker that's, or the glue, if you want, between all of these organizations. We partner with government in ways that make sense for the industry. These members are voluntary members. They will not stay in the club if there's no value. So that's another sort of lesson learned. You must provide value through these institutes to the participants, or they will not remain in it and won't continue to sustain it. Okay. And I just sort of made a list that I wanted to wrap up with, and ended up being the 3 Ps. So I'll focus on those just for a couple minutes. One thing that isn't emphasized in the report here, but I think it's implied, and that is, in some ways, it's about the people. It's about bringing people together from the different stakeholder groups, because that's how ideas flow. It's about educating students, it's about training workers, it's about getting the industry people explaining to the other parts of the institute and the other stakeholders what they need, so that those needs can be addressed. Everybody gets up in the morning wanting to help, in a sense, but you have to have the connections between the people for that to happen. So it's going to be between industry and industry, university and industry, government, university and industry. I really see these institutes as bringing together people. The second P is partnership, and that was a word that David used as well. It can't be a supplier-vendor kind of relationship between the government and the industry. These need to be partnerships, and that's another reason for having this independent place where the institutes are managed and run. And the third P is patience. I know we've started a pilot institute, and everybody hopes there's some immediate results and benefit. But our experience in the semiconductor industry, that it does take time and you need to be patient, and these kinds, many of the outputs and outcomes will take many years, especially when you're involving people and moving people and training people and educating people. So, people, partnership, and patience.
Before you stop, can you just also talk about the financial funding model for SRC?
Okay, glad to. And I do want to mention that Semitech was started in, I think it was 1987. It was co-funded 50-50 between industry and government, and that was a 10-year partnership in funding, and it was $100 million a year from government and from industry. So to the size matters comment, it does need to make a difference. It needs to be a substantial amount, and in that case, because you're talking bricks and mortar, and in these cases I think you may be too, that's part of the reason. SRC's funding model is there are several actually. Our core funding model was based on essentially a metric of the size of the company, so a sort of small percent of a very big number goes to SRC, and that's how our core program operates, with a cap on the membership fee, thereby making sure that no one company becomes the big gorilla in a sense. And we have a couple of members who are capped. I can tell you our cap is actually $7.5 million per year, so that's a substantial membership fee. Some companies are capped and a number are not. Other of our programs, and we have a number of different legally distinct programs under our SRC umbrella today, are flat fee models. So there's flexibility in the private sector for doing things that make sense for different programs, but they each require the members to contribute a significant amount, and there's that skin in the game is very important. They pay attention when they have skin in the game. We do. We have a program, in fact it's just been renewed, that is co-funded with DARPA. We have programs that have sort of different time horizons, and then one with the nearest time horizon, our core program, is predominantly industry funded. We have a longer term program which is jointly funded 50-50 with DARPA, and then we have the Nanoelectronics Research Initiative, which is even longer term and is in some ways a good model perhaps for some of these institutes because it has some state monies. It's a number of centers that are geographically distributed, so each of the centers has been successful in getting some state support and has a smaller number of member companies that are very like-minded, and it's been a very sort of positive experience for them because it is so long-term. And I think that's another lesson that SRC has learned is it's easier to get agreement and consensus on these very long-term needs. There's less competitiveness and more agreement in general.
Okay, thank you. Any?
You know, it's real easy for me to stand before you and be an advocate for the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. Just look at how quickly the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute is coming together and the real expectations that exist for that industry. And there are any number of exciting and sexy areas where moving the TRL or MRL from 2 to 7 will capture the imagination and the money to accomplish great things. I suggest, however, that years from now, one of the biggest benefits of the NNMI will be the impact made on existing mature industries and on small business manufacturing firms. I'm a representative of this declining group, a small business manufacturing firm with 150 employees. Specifically, I own a